are ready to bring on our first guest of the evening. We have Gina here, who is a breast cancer survivor. How you doing, Gina?
So far, so good, April. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for being on the show tonight. It was such a pleasure to meet you. I think we met about a month ago or so, and your story was so compelling. I was like, Gina, you got to come on our show, man. So I'm so
Oh, I'm
thankful.
glad the story comes in handy for something.
Right on, right on. So listen, your story is so unique. We don't talk to too many people who are diagnosed at a young age like you were. So can you take us back, Gina, to kind of what led you to finding out about your cancer diagnosis?
Yeah, sure. I was 25 years old. And I think this was the time it don't promise me you won't do the math. It was around 1994. Um, and it was even more unusual than it is today for somebody at that age to be like diagnosed with breast cancer. So unusual that I had to work really, really hard to get diagnosed in the first place. It's just one of those weird situations. I was out on a boat all day, took a shower, and was like slathering in moisturizer because I'm really fair skinned and I burn easy. My skin gets dry. And I just felt something that didn't feel right. If I were completely honest, I would have to say that if I actually thought it was something, I probably never would have gone to the doctor. Um, but I did go to the doctor, thankfully, and they told me, of course, oh God, no, you're way too young for this, but we'll send you to have this ultrasound, just in case. And I went for that appointment, and they're like, well, we didn't quite see what we want to see, but you're way too young for cancer, so everything will be fine. And I remember saying, well, how do you know everything will be fine? So they then said, well, okay, we'll send you to have like a needle biopsy. And then they were like, well, that we didn't find exactly what we expected to find there. So I think there wasn't, and again, this is a number of years ago, so I think there was another test, and then there was a surgical biopsy. And even at the surgical biopsy, the surgeon removed this thing and said, fabulous news. This is a fibroadenoma, which is a benign condition. Come back next week and have your stitches taken out. And when next week came around, I had gotten a call while I was at work. It's a very vivid memory for me because it's like a phone that still had like a cord and stuff like that. I was just starting my career, and it was the doctor's office, and I had just assumed, like, I mean, I got a message. I assumed they wanted to change my appointment. So when I called back and they told me the doctor was in a procedure, could they take a message? When I told them who I was, they were like, oh wait, we'll go get him. And so I got that diagnosis. Hey, we made a mistake, on the phone when I was 25 at work. It was a dramatic movie scene, like drop the phone and be like, what? So
Oh
that's
my
when
gosh.
it started.
Yeah, so you're just 25 years old and you got that news, and I mean, they were as shocked as you were. This isn't anything that they expected. And then by this time at 25 years old, you're not going in for mammograms or anything because again, we're too young, right? Too young to have something like that.
Sure, way too young. Yep.
So how much time was it between the moment that you noticed this oddity when you were putting the lotion on, and the time that you were actually diagnosed? How much time had passed?
I'm gonna guess it was probably 6 or 7 weeks. It was an interesting time because I was young and healthy, in theory, and it was the like 1 year of my life that was in an HMO, like from an insurance perspective, because I never went to the doctor anyway. And like I didn't tell anybody during that time because I really didn't. I'm a little weird that way. I didn't want anybody to be in that space until I sort of knew what was happening. And so that was probably about 7 weeks. And then when I got that diagnosis, I pulled a friend out of a meeting at work. And all right, remember the time was 1994. So she dragged me off to Barnes and Noble and pulled every book off the bookcase.
Right, right.
Um,
You weren't able to Google all the answers at that time
exactly.
so
And I
much.
mean, I
Yeah.
did everything I can to avoid like telling my mother, I guess. But eventually I did have to tell her. And between her and my aunt, or she and my aunt, um, like this doctor in the HMO had said, "Oh, you don't, first it told me, misdiagnosed me. Then he said, you don't need to have like surgery. Like we'll just do a small lumpectomy. You don't have to have chemotherapy." And fortunately, the wherewithal of some of the smarter women in my family dragged me off to specialists that the HMO wouldn't cover, and kept taking me to another one and another one and another one because I refused to accept what they were telling me, because I really wanted to believe that first doctor who said, "Yeah, you don't have to have any of this really dramatic stuff done." But then I had these renowned, like New York, yeah, I live in New York specialists telling me, "Oh yeah, you not only do you need to have it done, you're going to have it done in a like really big way." So it was a little bit of I mean, it was a lot of a shock to the system, I guess.
So Gina, when you mentioned earlier, you said that you really didn't want to say anything to your mom. Do you think that that was just making it too real for you, or what were you thinking at the time? Do you recall?
Um, it's just I'm not good at having people. It would feel smothering to me, and I just, yes, in one regard, that would be like the start of like the real having to sort of deal with this. But also, you always hear like parents, and like I couldn't imagine how this was going to make her feel, like just as like a parent of a 25-year-old and thinking like what the heck is going on. But I was selfishly more concerned with how I was going to feel, so I didn't want to deal with it, right? And I didn't want people to ask me a bunch of questions because I'm like, I don't know, I'm trying to figure it out.
I don't think of it as selfish at all. I mean, I think it's super important when you're going through something traumatic like that to be able to recognize, hey, what do I need for me, and to take care of yourself first, and kind of get your own mind wrapped around what's going on before you bring other folks into the fold. I can totally understand that. And everybody responds differently when they're diagnosed. Some people want a million people to know. Some people don't want anyone to know. Some people just want very close people. It's all different, all kinds of things. And being so young, I know that played such a big part in your thought process back then, because I mean, accepting something like that at 25, that just sounds just terrible, very scary.
Yeah, I mean, it was the momentary shock of thinking, I'm not going to live to be 30. This is crazy, right? So, and I think I needed to come into like my space and how I was going to deal with it. But and I thought I dealt with it better than a lot of people around me, but that might just be my opinion.
I hear you. I hear you. Definitely. I mean, everybody does deal with it differently. So we're 7 weeks in, and you've gotten the diagnosis. They've taken you to specialists, and now you understand. Hey, this is the big deal. You're going to have to do something more. So what was it that the kind of combined uh, suggestion to you? Like, what was their opinion? What?
So, well, it was unanimous that I absolutely positively had to have I don't know if they still call it this, a lot's changed, like modified radical mastectomy, which basically means like it's the skin, the muscle, I mean, everything goes.
Yeah, I remember. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to say that yeah, they used to do a thing called a radical mastectomy where they'd take muscle and everything else, and now they don't do that. Now it's just like a double mastectomy, and it doesn't take all those things out anymore. But at the time back then, yeah, they had a lot of people doing radical mastectomies, but it wasn't like all the muscle. You said it was like a partial.
Oh no, it was all, but I only had one side done.
Got you. Okay.
And
Gotcha.
I hear a lot of folks talk. I heard you tell your story, and people do ask me, well, how come they didn't recommend you do both? I was like, I don't know, but all I can think of is that even they were just so shocked. Nobody really knew what to do with me, and were trying not to traumatize me more than they needed to, I guess. But I did that. I had some really unpleasant chemotherapy, and then I had.
And again, I got to point out that 94 was a different time than what's almost 2024. That's a lot of years in difference, and the chemo is probably much different then than it was now. I'm not trying to make light of it or anything, but I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
bet
I
it
mean,
was I bet it was a lot harder, right?
It's horrible. It's interesting because, of course, I mean, I'm currently a cancer patient again. It's my third time. So I do spend time back at the oncologist's office, but I'm on more medication. And I see all the gals like going in for chemo and like with their cold caps and all this other stuff. Like
And
we
their hands in ice or
hate to
whatever.
sound like I'm not 90, I promise, but like I feel like when I say I was like in our day, we just went and stuck out our arm. And I remember it probably being the one time in my life that I like read the side effects and like, the nurse or tech or whatever they call them was coming with the needle. I was like, hey, they're like, do you have any questions? I said, yeah, I'd really love to know about this sudden death potential side effect. Um,
Yikes. I don't recall seeing that one. I remember seeing like possible leukemia and stuff and
oh, there
but
were a
good
bunch of
lord.
possible
Probably.
long-term things, but I was at that moment thinking I already know long-term I'm going to die of cancer. My perspective
Oh,
changed since then, but at that
yeah.
moment, so like, but I'm that's going to probably take a little while. This sudden death was really sort of more curious to me, and that was so they were like, well, you could suffer cardiac arrest, but we have an antidote in the other room. I was like, hey, bring him in this room. Um, so yeah, so
Good call. You're like, why the hell's it in the other room? Bring it in here.
I know, and
Love
listen,
that.
I didn't have another woe is me back in the day. Like I didn't have a port. Um, so as a result of this very strong chemotherapy, which I was told, listen, when I finally like landed on the surgeon that I work with, she was like a godsend. She was probably only a few years older than me. She was like the protege of this very well-known person. And like she just looked at me and she's like, literally by the time I was done speaking to her, she had me booked for surgery 3 days later and was like, hey, we're going to do all this stuff. And then you're going to see the medical oncologist and we're going to dial everything up really, really hard because you're so young and your body can take it. And this is also, we can still have this conversation. So, we'll be having this conversation when you're 86 or something like that. So, and it was like, so this one woman who I've run into in random places as well as the hospital since then, like made all the difference.
That's
Because
so awesome. I
it's
always talk
that
about how
distinction.
important it is to have a good medical team that you trust and that you're comfortable with. It just makes such a huge difference, in that. So when you did start, so you had your surgery and you said it was, can you say the name, what you called it again? Uh,
Modified radical mastectomy. Another thing they didn't do yet then was a sentinel node biopsy. So I had all the lymph nodes removed as well.
wow. Yeah.
Which means I had to have all the chemo in one arm and like I still can't have any weight or needles or blood pressure on my left arm. But I don't have any real good veins left in my right arm, so it is constantly a battle. But I'm lucky to I'm lucky.
Yeah. To be sitting here, right?
All right.
Yeah. So tell us about I know you, like you mentioned, you alluded to a few minutes ago, you're on your third fight with breast cancer. Um but I do want to hear just a little bit about the surgery that you had back then. What was that like? Like how did you recover? Did you do reconstruction? Do you recall how long the recovery time was and things?
Recovery was a couple of months because again they've removed muscle and all kinds of like tissue as well as like the breast tissue. um and I remember it being fairly traumatic the first time I was willing to look when the bandages were off, like, but they had put in a tissue expander right at the end of the surgery and the removal and partially um inflated it. They fill it with water. I don't remember, but partially filled it. And then over the weeks following that, like you would go, well, actually no. I had the chemo. Surgery first, then chemo. Then I was having the tissue expander done, and then several months later, I had the reconstructive surgery done.
Wow. So you had full reconstruction on the one breast that was removed, and then you had chemo. And what kind of side effects do you recall from the chemotherapy?
Oh my God, I was just sick. I was exhausted. Like I couldn't get out of bed for like 4 days. And then, I mean, I was 25 and didn't realize that I really wasn't all that important in my job yet at that time. But like I would really struggle for 4 days, and then I would drag myself out of bed and like get on the train and go to work. Um, and because then too, I didn't want people to know. And of course, I lost all my hair, and they told me I would. And I got this really cool wig. Like before I started losing my hair, and I had the same highlights put in. But I don't remember. I mean, I just remember being like really sick, and then preparing you for you're probably going to lose your hair, but not thinking that for a minute about my eyebrows or my like eyelashes or any of that stuff. How you just sort of look strange. On the upside, I didn't have to shave my legs for a year, and I think I never had a bad hair day with the wig. Pull it on and go. So there was that. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I remember that. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't talk about when they go through any kind of cancer where they lose their hair. They just talk about the hair on their head, and they don't talk about losing their eyelashes or their eyebrows. Or I remember the weirdest thing for me was when I realized I lost the hair in my nose, like no nose hair. And I was like, whoa, like I have no hair anywhere. But yeah, it was really nice not having to shave, but some of those things you're just not used to. And again, for those of you just joining, Gina is a breast cancer survivor. We're talking about when she was first diagnosed back in 1994 and going through a modified radical mastectomy. Is that right?
that's
And
right.
then got it. Hey, and then also going through chemo and how the chemo at that time made her horribly sick and lost all the hair and everything. So you had that great wig, and so no one at your work knew you were going through treatment.
There were a couple of people who knew, but yeah, that was exactly the reason I did it. I had been, I had a haircut similar to this like a year before this all happened, and I was engaged and thinking I wanted flexibility and how I was going to wear my hair, so I was starting to grow it back. And then I had the wig made. I cut my hair short and started wearing the wig to work even beforehand. But I would really freak out my dear friend Petula, who I should have asked to join to listen in today, because I would do things. I don't know if you wore a wig, April, in your time at all, but like the edge could really like my skin was also really dry, so it would really irritate like this part of my head, like right along the
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I would
I
do something like this to scratch it, but it would really look like I was getting ready to pull my scalp off, I guess, and
yeah,
it used to freak her out. But so we still have some fun.
yeah, yeah. I did wear a wig just a very few times. I wore you know, I had like 3 or 4 different wigs thinking I was gonna wear them all the time, and then I ended up just being like, "Oh, it's a hassle." So I just didn't do it, but I was, kind of, more public about it out of the gates. I was 41, so it was a little bit more easy, to deal with publicly, I think, and like we mentioned, everybody kinda does it differently, but you were able to keep it from everybody at work the entire time, or
I mean, I don't know if they suspected something. They didn't tell me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I don't know. I'm sure there was some conversation. I mean, amongst the people, I was really lucky. The people I worked with at the time, we really were, even though we were in a big company, we were very much like a family. So there were certainly people who knew, but it wasn't something I was like advertising, and
Yeah, I got you.
right, they were
Yeah.
all really supportive through the whole journey. And I was still with those same people when I was 30 and got diagnosed the second time. So, um, yeah, good to have good people around you.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, you got us to 30 just now, so you finished up your treatment, reconstruction, and everything. You were probably 26, 27 by the time you cleared out of
Oh,
everything
probably
from
back
this
then
first bout?
26. 26. Yeah, I was 26. Or maybe you're right. I might have been close to 27. I'm trying to remember because I got married. I was 27 and I was just had hair again and it grew back. I mean, I kept looking for the silver lining. Like if I was going to be sick and I was going to be nauseous, yeah, I'd lose weight. I would have appreciated at the time that I wasn't heavy in the first place. And then I've always been plagued, but I have like really thin, fine hair. And I was like, it's an Italian old wives' tale. It would be like sometimes, if you shaved your hair or you lost your hair, it would come back thicker. And it did for like 3 weeks. It was like wavy, and then it went back to its normal thing. And
Yeah. Yep. I remember the same. Yep.
but I remember
Totally
being
feel
excited. I
you.
was like, wow, this is cool.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, right, and then you're like, "What happened? Where the party stopped. No
yeah,
more fun."
maybe.
Like, my eyebrows never fully grew back in either, like, it was kind of annoying. But, okay, so you're, like, 27 or so, and then they tell you you're cancer-free, I'm assuming, is that right at that point?
Yeah, they blasted my system. And really, at the time, they would say, hey, if you go 5 years without a recurrence, you consider yourself cured. So I was getting ready to plan myself this really big party. Well, not a really big party, but a party that I was really excited about, to mark the 5 year anniversary. And, you know, you still have all your follow ups and checkups. And I had this pain in my arm. And I was ignoring it because I was finishing graduate school and I was working full time, and um, both at the same time, which was kind of tough. And then, like, I finished school and I was at the doctor. I was like, "Yeah, I've got this pain," but it was like really in like this part of my arm. So I didn't really think anything of it. But I was still young and pretending to be healthy, so I didn't go to doctors other than my follow ups, for all of these things. And
Well, and plus with a pain in that area, you certainly wouldn't just jump all the way to it being something serious, right?
right, right. So I just mentioned it randomly when I was in the office, and she was like feeling around. And she's like, you know what? I feel something. It's probably scar tissue that's like, you know, on the nerve, and that's why it's causing me that pain. So I had that surgery, no big deal, just like the other one. And I go back to her office. This is my super, super awesome world renowned surgeon. And you know how, like, when you just go for a checkup and you finish, they're like, great, come back in however long. Or they say, great, get dressed and come meet me in my office. And you're like, what the stop?
Yeah, you never want that. Yeah. Right.
What do you mean meet you in your office? And she's
Right.
like, oh, just get dressed, meet me in my office. I was like, just tell me now. And she said, nobody would have been more surprised than me, but it's a tumor. And we have to start looking at what we're gonna do now. And I was like,
So exactly where was the tumor located?
well, the tumor was in, like, would have been in lymph nodes probably if I had any lymph nodes left.
Uh-huh.
But it was sort of putting pressure on the nerve, but I felt the pain like down on the underside of my forearm.
Huh, okay.
So it was very odd, and nobody would suspect this to be cancer. And this is why I tell people that my second and third diagnosis, and we haven't talked about the third one yet, we're like, almost by accident. It's like, we all have aches and pains, right? Like, and have passed the 50 mark now. So I get up and something hurts like all the time, but you start moving and you feel better. So a lot of these things I would never think to mention to anybody. But I mentioned that one, and nobody would have thought it was anything. If I didn't tell this doctor, probably I would have gotten a similar reaction than I got in the first time. And I wasn't saying, hey, check for cancer. I was saying, something's uncomfortable and it's all on this side. And it took a long time to get feeling back after surgery on my arm, because I had all the lymph nodes removed. So yeah, so that was another surprise. I
So
went through with the
so
party, but I wasn't celebrating the same thing.
yeah, well, when you noticed that you were having that pain, did it occur to you that it was the same side that you had had breast cancer in? It didn't, okay.
No, because I don't know. I mean, while I said before that when I was first diagnosed, I was assuming I wouldn't be here till 30. That didn't last very long, right? Because I sort of this brilliant doctor gave me, okay, we're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. So it's like having your list. You check this off, I check this off, and then I go about my life. Um, so had convinced myself that I was going to manage this breast cancer thing the way a diabetic manages having diabetes. Like, it's not cool and fun to have it, but you can live with it, and it's sort of you treat it like a chronic thing. You just have to go to your appointments and take your meds and have your various exams and all of those things, and you just go about life. And that was my plan. I mean, technically that's what I've done even to this point, but there are a few like gotchas like in the path along the way.
Right. So whenever they realized that this was a tumor, what were they planning on doing about it? Now, and also did they explain if it was a new cancer, or was it an extension of uh your cancer from before? Was it like had
Yeah,
it metastasized? Anything?
it was technically a metastatic occurrence, though nobody really called it that. I mean, it wasn't in. So I was diagnosed at like stage 2B the first time. This probably put me into a latter part of 3. Um, because it wasn't that distant, it wasn't in a major organ. It was a weird thing that nobody expected. So yeah, so then like for that, she just went back in to, go a little further around to get like clean margins, as they say in the surgery. Um, and then sent me off to, um, again, back to sort of the medical oncology world. And I didn't want to work with the same medical oncologist from the first time. And there was some strange bout of luck. One of my graduate school classmates was a breast cancer researcher and oncologist. And of course, he couldn't treat me, but I could ask him for all these recommendations, as well as asking my surgeon for recommendations. And I went and saw 4 of them, and every single one of them had a different recommendation, which was a little frustrating.
Oh, that's got to be confusing, especially when you're in kind of a traumatic moment as it is, right?
Yeah. So one was doing, there was this um, trial at the clinical trial at the time for like a breast cancer vaccine. At the end of the day, I said to him, well, why is it you sent me all these people you have a lot of trust and respect for, that they could come back with such, everybody had a different recommendation. I mean, there were overlaps in some of them, but everybody had a different recommendation. And I was really not looking to sign up for more chemo. Um, that was just such a grueling experience. I really it wasn't. Um, I don't know if I would have accepted. If somebody told me that was the only choice I had, I might have done it maybe, but I didn't plan on it. So
Right.
what he said to me was, well, this isn't really going to be a great answer, but quite frankly, we don't know scientifically what to do with you. Normally, if somebody were in her mid 40s, we would think that was somebody who was diagnosed young. And in different decades of life or different stages of recurrences, they sort of had like a playbook at the time on, you know, how they would treat somebody or what they would do, but there was no playbook for me. So
That has to be scary
they were
too. I
making
mean,
it up as they went along,
ah,
I guess. Um,
and I don't want to miss asking you this, but like when they told you it was cancer again, how did that hit you in the first place? I mean, that had to just be so devastating because
I
you
am
could have been
certain
expecting that.
there weren't a lot of words, but the word I specifically remember is one I'm pretty sure you don't want me to use on your on this
I
broadcast.
got you. Yeah.
It was sort of like an oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, I mean, it was like running into a brick wall because I had felt
Absolutely.
for a long time like I did all the stuff. I did this thing and that thing and that thing and I was ready to charge forward, and instead I was like, you know, 30 years old in the midst of a divorce, um, finishing graduate school, but like realizing all of a sudden that, the guy I rented my apartment from, that my then separated the husband I was separated from. So I was ahead of my time with cancer and also ahead of my time with like getting divorced, right? 30 friends hadn't settled down yet. So there was just a lot going on in my life, and I needed to find a place to live because I didn't renew the lease on the place my ex-husband and I lived together, but I was finishing graduate school, so I didn't have a place to go. And I thought, like, God, if I move in, my life is a mess at this point. And if I move in even for 2 days with my mother, this is like just going to be a bad sitcom. All right, someday, or maybe a drum com. I don't know, but some sort
Something
of
like that.
TV show that would be
Right, right.
have some level of entertainment. Um, so yeah, it was like, are there no blanking breaks to be had? Like that was I mean, I wouldn't wish it upon anybody else. And I don't think I actually said, why me? Because at that point, I felt like I had found some strength from the whole situation. So I just had to like muster it up again. I think that's really how I thought about it. Like I like didn't go through weeks of feeling sorry for myself. I think I went through a couple of hours of feeling sorry for myself. Called that same friend and been like, "You're not gonna blanking believe this," um,
Right.
and yeah, and got back after seeing all those oncologists. I decided not to have chemo, so I had that surgery to clear the margins, and then I had radiation treatment. Um, for like 6 or 8 weeks. I can't really remember now because it was still a while ago.
And how was that? How was that for you? Because you had only had chemo before, so you never experienced radiation till this
So
time,
much
right?
better than chemo. So
Really
better. Um, I
noted.
remember because it's breast cancer and because what they do, they put a few like pin dot tattoos on you, but they have to make this mold. I don't know if they still do that now. And you have to like lie in this mold, but I still didn't have like a full range of motion. So the time it took them to do the mold, and it's like tears are pouring out of my eyes because it's like so painful to lie in that position. But after that part was done, it was like in and out, 2 seconds. You went 5 days a week at the same time every day. You saw all the other cancer patients that you got to know. Cancer patients, in case anybody's curious, in my experience, have a wicked sense of humor, and we have to exercise it on one another because it will horrify people in our lives who care about us, right? It's like a weird.
Good call. Yeah, good call.
Um, so, and they had these like older women there, and they would be like, "Oh my God, sweetie, what are you doing here?" And aren't you married? And I was like, oh, no, I'm in the middle of a divorce. And the one lady, this is, I associate this with cancer, even though it doesn't have anything to do with cancer, told me that it was okay because not to worry, I was so young, good to get it out of the way, the marriage part, not the cancer part. Although I'm sure she thought that'd be good to get out of the way as well.
Right, right.
She said, first one's not supposed to work out. The second one, husband, will die before you. And the third one is just going to be the keeper. So I was like, well, okay, interesting perspective.
Oh, I have 3 cousins that can attest to that being true, or 2 cousins.
Well,
So
I
yeah,
never got
maybe there is
married
truth to
again,
that.
or at least thus far I haven't. So,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, it made me very tired, but tired I could deal with.
Right.
I could take a nap. I went to work and I told like our department head, same place that I worked before, hey, this is happening. He was like, well, you just need to tell us what you need. And I thought I was joking. I was like, I might need to take naps in the middle of the day. And the next day there was a sofa in my office. So it was like, it wasn't all
Nice.
bad.
Yeah, really. So you made it through. This is the second bout when you're 30 years old. You had a surgery to have everything removed, get your clear margins, had radiation. Then you're said to be cancer free again, I would presume. Or did they just call it remission, or did they give it a name at that time? Do you remember?
They didn't give it a name. They just said, go live life and be happy. I mean, at the
Right.
time, I think it was at first I was going in once a month for follow-ups, and then I was going every 3 months, and then it was every 6 months, and then it was every year, and somewhere along the line, the oncologist that I chose then moved from one hospital to another, and you know, we get very attached to our specialists, and this really weird thing happened, where she was leaving New York and going to take a position at Dartmouth in New Hampshire, and she's like, you know what? You don't even need me anymore. I'm going to put you in the survivorship program. And I was like, oh, well, if you're leaving, I'm going back over there because I hate this hospital. It is one of the world's renowned cancer hospitals, but I just didn't like the patient experience that much. But I loved my medical oncologist. So she was leaving, and I said to her that while she was still there, well, first I said to her, how can you do this to me? You've been my cancer good luck charm. Um, and that's when she said, you don't need me anymore. And I will, admit something terrible. Like through all of this time, I was a smoker. I'm not now. And I had said to her, we've talked about having my lungs scanned. I want to do that before you leave, just in case there's something happening there as well, and you need to refer me. I need you to help me get set up with the right people.
And so how old are you at this point?
I don't want to say, but it was
Oh, okay.
just about a year ago. If you've lost
Got you.
your
Got
math,
you. No,
that
you
would
don't have to say, yeah, a year ago is perfect. I'm not doing any math and no one else is either.
yeah, it was about a year ago.
Okay.
No, I'm lying. A little over a year and a half, year and 3/4 ago. So so I got a lung scan. Like my dad died of lung cancer, and I had been a smoker for a long time, so we got that checked. And there were some nodules. Nobody was concerned about this. Interestingly enough, during this time, I had a pain in my shoulder. Same arm, right? But it really mostly felt like muscular, getting stiff, maybe getting a little arthritis. Lord knows this arm had been traumatized over the years. So while I was there, I think I had mentioned to somebody, nobody thought much of it. And then I had gone to see my old surgeon who I had to like she was really renowned these days and only sees people with um actual diagnoses, which at this point I didn't have. And I was like, hey, I got this pain in my arm. And like the people didn't know me, I hadn't seen her in years. So I literally pulled one of those, could you tell her that it's me and she might fit me into her schedule? And she did.
Awesome.
Um, and she came in and she started telling me, my God, we were so young when we first met. And I told her, I didn't think of you that way because I thought of you as the person who saved my life. But it didn't occur to me that you were like maybe a year or two older than me at that time because I was putting like all this faith in you and need for you to like help me figure out what to do. She said, I don't feel anything, but you do. So like, I'm just going to send you for an MRI, whatever. And all those things came out clear, no problem. Go back to the pulmonologist. So there were no problems with the nodules, but she had sent me just in case for a PET scan. And while she's telling me all the good news, she's like, "Oh, I really want to talk to your oncologist." I'm like, "Huh?" And she says, and I said, "Well, my oncologist is like leaving this fine establishment. This is why I'm having this done now." And she's like, "Okay, well, the nodules don't look like a problem, but I see some activity in a PET scan. Sure, right? But it's like there's much cellular activity. It's how they look for like likelihood of like cancer activity in that area." And sure enough, next thing I was having, it's actually in my shoulder blade. So next thing I was having like a biopsy of my shoulder blade, and like to say I was surprised. I had a good run. Um, but I had a weird pain that nobody would have looked for cancer, and so sure enough, I had cancer again, and so now I am a stage 4 cancer patient with bone metastasis. Um, there's not much they can do. At first, I was like, "Well, can we like take out my shoulder and get a replacement?" They're like, "Yeah, no." Um,
Yeah, I'm just like picturing you just like being chopped away at and like so much in that area is just so much happening over there.
Well, yeah,
Like
just then I had this like this biopsy of the bone. But remember, I'm not even supposed to carry a bag on the shoulder because I have no lymph nodes. So the swelling of that was significant. And I was terrified it was gonna be like lymphedema. I was gonna be like swollen forever. But I did get one break, like my arm went back to normal size. Um, but so yeah, so I'm back on the journey. Um, and it's been a bit of a wild ride, but here I am.
wow, wow. I'm so impressed and inspired by your strength and courage and bravery in this whole thing. I mean, being so young and having so many bouts of recurrence and just kind of looking at it like, okay, I gotta like brush off and go fight and stand up against this, and you just keep pushing forward. And right now, are you doing chemo or what is the treatment plan for you? What do they want to do with you?
I am on medications, so not having chemo or radiation. Um, I'm in the control group in a trial that looks to see if the combination of one of the medications that I'm on with radiation tweaks up the immune system to self fight. If I start having pain or so the standard of care here it's metastatic, right? Usually you have systemic treatment like a chemotherapy to rid your body of cancer. That's not going to happen at this point. So it's, something I live with. Um, and there's some odd comfort in that too, like not sitting around hoping it never comes back because it's there and it's not going anywhere. Um,
I've never heard of it referred to like that, but
I,
that kind of does make sense because then you don't have like a fear. You're just like, okay, here I am. This is kind of
well,
what
there's
it
a fear
is.
you don't want to. Because then I'm like, I mean, I had a few bad moments because I was like, oh, well, bone metastasis in my mind, that's like the end of the road, right? Like it's in your bones and it's going to spread more and all that other stuff. Um, but they thought it was sort of good news because it wasn't in my brain. And it is, knock on wood, shockingly, after years of smoking, not in my lungs. I have since quit smoking, not because of this, totally unrelated reason that I was in the hospital. And after being in the hospital for 3 weeks without smoking, I was like, I guess it's time. But yeah, so now I'm on medication that's called this CDK4/6 inhibitor, and some aromatase inhibitors, and um, I have an infusion once every 3 months, but it's not chemo. It's sort of protect my bones from getting too mushy from all this other medication. So it's it's a journey. I'm here. I'm still treating it. Once I got over that shock, I'm still treating it like I have this chronic condition, that just needs to be paid attention to. So I have a PET scan every 3 months. I just hope to not see it grow. I had a little scare because I had something else um, in my neck, but it's turns out to be something they call a Warfan's tumor. It's unrelated and not cancerous. So but we're monitoring that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't know, it feels good to be referred to as somebody who has like strength and whatever, but I don't really know that you have a choice, although I have been asked
Yeah.
by other people. I had, a friend's sister who was diagnosed. She was probably in her 50s when she was originally diagnosed. And at that point, I was probably just coming out of my second bout of things. So I would have been 30, 31. And she spent every day of her life, like being convinced it was in her liver now, it was in her brain. And she didn't have a mastectomy. She didn't have, and I'm not saying, oh, if you don't have like the most severe thing, it's no big deal. It's a big deal, right? Like she had a tumor removed, but she didn't have mastectomy. Um, so she worried all the time, and she would ask me, and this is all I can tell people. And I have welcomed many people over the years into this club that nobody aspires to join, but I people will say, hey, can I give so and so your phone number? And I'm like, sure. Um, and people ask me that question, like, how do you do it without being terrified all the time? And I'm like, look, there's so much time and opportunity to be terrified when you hear those words that, like, I didn't fight. I didn't have chemotherapy. I didn't have these surgeries. I didn't do all this stuff so that I could spend every day worrying about it. I did it so that I could live my life the way I would have lived it anyway, like had this not happened. And therefore, um, and now I know when and I kind of knew it was a when the second time because it was sort of not in breast tissue. So I guess that could have been considered metastatic back then. Um, that there was plenty of time to worry about it and think about it then, that it didn't make sense to waste all the days in between tormenting myself with it.
That's such solid advice. It really is. I mean, we only have one life to live and you got to live every minute. And regardless of if you're going through a disease like this or not, like you just have to embrace every day, you know? It's something people don't think about or don't realize oftentimes until it's too late that they didn't really have the perspective to embrace life, you know?
Yep. And I don't know if I actively embrace it. I just go about it. Some days I probably actively embrace it. And I think I give myself excuses to, like, whine at times about other things, but not about this. So um, that's my story, and it continues. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe in a few years I'll have something else to tell you. And
Yeah. Well, I would love to get a chance to talk to you again, Gina. You've been a huge inspiration to me, and I know those watching right now as well. And just sharing your story and everything that you've gone through so that people have a better understanding for what it's like being diagnosed with breast cancer and just living with breast cancer like you are. Just very inspiring. I thank you so much for being on tonight.
well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you for doing the talk you did at our
Yeah,
company, so where I got to
sure.
meet you.
Yeah,
And I love what you've done with your advocacy. So keep it up.
thank you.
Should you ever be in New York, give me a buzz.
I totally will, and I hope to chat with you again and get an update from you later on, okay?
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a
All
great
right, take care.
rest of the show. Bye bye.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Oh, happy Thanksgiving. Thanks.
Bye. Everybody, that was Gina, man. Give it up for her. Amazing breast cancer survivor. And wow, just such an amazing story.